appreciate rasa, we have to appreciate tattva. Before you can understand the inner life of God, first you have to understand and appreciate the position of God. Therefore, Krishna in Vrindavan, Nandanandan Krishna, is Krishna in his most intimate form. But before you can appreciate Krishna in Vrindavan, first you have to understand that Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So when we refer to Krishna as Vasudeva, or the son of Vasudeva, then what happened in the prison house of Kamsa? When Krishna was born as Vasudeva Krishna, then he showed himself in which form? Four-handed form, to prove that he's the Supreme Lord. In other words, in the Shastra, often Krishna is glorified first as Vasudeva, so that we can appreciate that, no, he is the Supreme Lord. And then once we have that respect, then we can develop the intimacy. Therefore, even you find in Bhagavatam, does the pastimes of Krishna immediately come first? No, that comes in the which canto? 10th canto. So first there are 9 cantos to help you understand that Krishna is the Supreme Person. And then you can understand that Krishna is supremely sweet. Does that make sense? Therefore, first we glorify Krishna as Vasudeva. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Okay? Good question. Alright, next. Yes?
Hey Krishna Maharaj. This was quite a popular argument from one of the YouTube videos I saw from an atheist. He argued that when we ask, when the many evidences that we give of existence of God, especially in India, are the different places where different pastimes of Krishna happen. For example, the Rama Setu for Lord Ramachandra. So he gave a very interesting example. He said, believing in Lord Ramachandra because Rama Setu exists is like believing in Spider-Man just because New York exists. So how would you defeat that argument?
Yeah, we don't believe in Ram because these places exist. We believe in Ram because, first of all, philosophically it makes sense. And then second of all, we experience that by worshipping Ram and by having a relationship with him, we experience him. And then thirdly, yes, all these historical things, they support the fact that Ram exists. Do you see what I'm saying? So we are not basing our belief in God on a historical site. But what we're saying is that the historical site and the historical facts further support what we have already believed or accepted or proved or perceived in our life. So the historical facts of Ram or Krishna or the Mahabharata, that's not for us the proof of God, but that's just supporting evidence that lends extra weight to the fact that this is true. Does that make sense?
Yes, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, good. Anyone else? Yes.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So I'm an atheist, right? So my point of view is, if devotees are servants of God and God is protecting them, let's say, why do bad things happen to devotees? Why some devotees are even attacked or sometimes they pass away? So does God arrange that to happen? Why does God arrange suffering for his own devotees?
Have your parents ever told you off?
Yes.
Have your parents ever put you into a situation where you sometimes have to experience some suffering?
Yes.
Do your parents love you?
Yes.
So there you go. So you have experience in your own life already of how someone who loves you may seemingly put you in a suffering position. And why did they put you in a suffering position, a seemingly suffering position, if they love you?
Punishment.
And do they just want to punish you? Why do they want to punish you?
Because he lessons.
Make you learn.
And what? Yeah. And how is punishment an exhibition of love?
Learn lesson.
Yeah.
You learn lessons. So that's the point, that even when it seems as though there's suffering coming from a loving God, we have to understand that that painful situation is required in order for the living entity to then evolve their consciousness. And so whenever answering, I'm just giving you also techniques, whenever you're answering people who have these doubts, what you can also, one powerful way you can answer them is by showing them that in their own life, they've already accepted this fact. So they're arguing against something that they've already accepted. Okay? So whenever someone asks an argument or poses a question, always think, question the question. Right? That's when you're debating, the first rule is question the question. Because most of the time what they're arguing against is something that they've already accepted in their own life. Yeah? Make sense?
Thank you.
Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Hare Krishna Maharaj. I'm also an atheist. So the question goes on religious diversity.
Okay.
You see there's
Different religions.
different religions. We see so much fighting going on between different religions. If God loved us all, then why wouldn't He just keep one religion for us all to have and kind of we can all just be not one. We can all follow one religion, and we could all walk back to Godhead. Or as you say, we will come back to Godhead.
So again, I give you the same argument. Can parents have more than one children? Do you find that sometimes?
Yes.
Okay, so they're all one family, multiple children. Do you sometimes find that the children fight with each other?
Yes.
Okay. Do the parents want them to fight?
No?
So why are they fighting?
Depends.
With free will. It's up to them. It's their choice. So God and do the parents force all of the children to do the same thing in their life, have the same occupation, no. So the parents give the children the free will to pursue their own path, and they can pursue their own path, and if they end up fighting, that's nothing to do with the parents, that's to do with the children themselves. So in the same way, number one, the reason why God gives so many religions is because there are so many different types of people who need different teachings to advance their consciousness. And then the conflict and the division is not caused because of the fact that there are different religions, it's caused by the fact that people just want to fight. Do you think in the place where there is no religion, life is more peaceful? Do you think that if you look at the biggest wars in the world, you'll actually find that most of them had nothing to do with religion? And even the wars that are specifically or seemingly fought on grounds of religion, if you look deeper, it's not really religion. They're fighting over money, land, power, and influence. And they're using religion to incite emotion in people. So religion doesn't actually cause war. People just want to fight and they'll use anything as an excuse. Does that make sense?
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Are you an atheist as well?
Yeah, I'm also an atheist. This is in continuation to Krishna Prabhu's question. So you said one parent can have many children, but many children have only one parent. So yeah, like mom and dad. So why do they differ on basic things such as idol worship? Many different religions have different perspectives on idol worship, and some deny, some support. So.
Okay, so if all the religions are coming from the same God, then why does it seem they have certain theological standpoints on different issues? Like say, for example, some believe in idol worship, some don't. Some believe in reincarnation, some don't. Some believe in karma, some don't. So then if it's all coming from the same God, why do they have different theologies? So first thing, there could be different reasons. The first reason could be that every religion doesn't necessarily reveal everything. So it's not that they're against something, it's just that in their teachings, that aspect has never been explained. Because at the time when God was giving that religion, He was not ready to give all of that knowledge because it would have been too much for them. So some religions are giving this much, and some religions are giving this much. And when this religion sees this extra bit that's not in their religion, they think it's a different religion. But actually, this religion is just an evolution.
Yeah.
Do you understand? Yeah. So that's the first reason why they may seemingly differ, because every religion is giving more knowledge. Right? So the most advanced religion gives the most knowledge. And therefore, when we say the Bhagavad Gita or the Vedas is the most advanced religion, we're not just saying that because we're Hare Krishnas. We're Hare Krishnas because that's the fact. And the fact is corroborated by the reason that if you want to find the most detailed knowledge, then you go to the Vedas. So that's the first point. The second reason why they may differ is not because the actual philosophies differ, but the people who are following that religion just don't get it. They misinterpret the religion, or they misunderstand the religion, and they say Hinduism stands for this, Christianity stands for this, and they create a conflict, but their own understanding of their religion is incomplete. And therefore, a lot of the religious differences are not in the philosophy, it's just in the people who have misinterpreted it. Does that make sense? So those are usually the two main reasons why you may find that theologically different religions differ.
Thank you,
Is that okay?
Just a small point from Ramesh Prabhu's question, Maharaj. You said that usually it's the people that differ, not the religions in itself. The philosophy is very similar. But certain practices, such as just being very particular here, idol worship, has been much emphasized on certain religions, and has been criticized very heavily in the others. So, and that's not the point of view of the people, but the very basis of their religion that's been mentioned in so many scriptures in different religions. So how would we reconcile that?
Yeah. For example, okay, let's take idol worship. Like, for example,
I'm just checking.
who is that guy? Can someone on their phone do a search of the meaning of the word graven? Graven. Because in the Christian religion, isn't it? That's what it says, right? Thou should not worship graven images. What does the word graven mean? Here, go on, say.
Deeply impressed, firmly fixed, or a carved idol.
A carved idol, yeah, right, that's the one, yeah, a carved idol. So now you have to understand, when in the Christian religion is talking about graven images, what it's talking about is that images which are manufactured by a human mind. So when Christianity speaks out heavily that one should not worship graven images, those in the Vedic tradition, they would actually agree 100%. Because if you go out there and make a graven image which is a manufactured understanding of God, we would say that's completely bogus. So actually, again, it comes back to understanding things in context, that what we're actually talking about is that one should worship a form of the Lord that's authorized. And therefore, we have no problem when the Christians say, thou should not worship a graven image. Because we agree. But our deities are not a graven image. They're actually explained by the Supreme Lord and descriptions from His own mouth about His form. See what I'm saying?
Yes,
and the other thing to see is that sometimes in certain religions, certain things are spoken out against because in that specific time in history, there was some major deviation on this, and therefore it had to be kind of removed. Like say for example, when Buddha comes, then what's happening is that there's a lot of animal violence going on. And in order to stop the animal violence, what does Buddha do? He rejects the Vedas. This is Krishna who comes to reject the Vedas, the knowledge that he himself gave. And why does he do that? Because sometimes at a certain point, a certain type of teaching, which seemingly is against the ultimate teaching, may need to be taught in order to move people forward. Does that make sense? Like if you're walking along a path and it gets blocked, then sometimes what you have to do is walk back and to the side, and you think, but you're going backwards. But you need to go back and to the side, so then you can actually go forward. Does that make sense?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you so much.
Okay, at the back.
Can we use the microphones because it's live broadcasted?
It's live. Anything you say will be held in evidence against you.
And this is a similar point to Aryan Prabhu, like, so idol worship is said is like strictly forbidden in some religions, but this is like, it goes the opposite way, so like meat eating is like, sometimes in other religions, like a noble thing to do. So is that the same kind of analogy, like sometimes it goes off the path kind of thing?
Yeah, and even in the, what to speak of other religions, even in the Vedic religions it's allowed. Isn't it? There are animal sacrifices, and we even find accounts of, you know, if someone is attached to eating meat, then there's a specific way in which you do it, you offer it, you sacrifice it, and you like that. But the later on, ultimately, we see that there is an evolution of thought where you actually give it up. You see, like, I'll give you an example. We follow 4 regulative principles, right? No meat eating, no intoxication, no gambling, and no illicit sex, right? But if you look, in the Vedic teachings, allowance is actually given for all 4 of these things. Right? You can do them under very, very strict regulation. But have you noticed what the scriptures are showing is that whenever you engage in any of these acts, you're going to be bound for trouble. Let me do a quiz with you and see whether you can see. Can you give me an example in the scripture of how intoxication led to downfall? Yeah, at the back? Yep.
Money, grief, and Nalakuvara.
Money, grief, and Nalakuvara. Very good. Can you give me another example of intoxication by which a whole family got destroyed?
Yadu dynasty.
The Yadu dynasty. Do you remember that one? They all started drinking and then they got so intoxicated that they all killed each other. That's worse than Saturday night in Manchester. Right? So intoxication. Can someone give me an example of how meat eating or hunting led to someone's problem? They didn't think it would be a problem, but later on it did. Yeah? Valmiki? Yeah, you want to explain?
Wasn't he a hunter before? And then didn't he get purified or something?
Yeah, that's true. But I want you to show me an example of how a seemingly innocent act of hunting then caused someone to have a big problem. Yeah, at the back. Dasarat, okay, can you explain?
I think that at one point in his life he could hunt, but like by that he would see, like he could hear the animal and he would shoot.
Mm-hmm.
So he shot a young boy, and that young boy was caring for his parents. So
Yes.
his parents cursed him that he wouldn't, like, his son would leave him or something like that.
Yes, very good. Yeah, so that's another example. Very good. And then, can someone give an example of how attraction to the opposite gender led to someone's downfall? Yeah.
The story of Ajamil.
Ajamil, okay, yeah, very good. And what was the last one? Gambling. Can someone give an example of gambling? This is the hardest one.
The chess game has the number of what they bet everyone.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah. So there you go. So can you see, like, these allowances are given, but then Scripture is constantly telling us it's better not to get anywhere close to these activities because they're ultimately going to create a problem in your life. Alright, next question.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Would there ever be a point where God would interfere with a man's free will if they possessed the power and had the intent of ending humanity?
Oh wow, okay. So if someone had a very, very bad intent, a free will, utilizing their free will to destroy, would Krishna intervene?
Yeah.
See, the thing is, Krishna gives everyone free will to desire things. And Krishna never interferes with that. But what Krishna does control is the outcome of their activities. Do you know what I mean? So like someone, if they have the free will to want to end the world, Krishna doesn't interfere with that. But what Krishna will do is intervene to make sure that souls are protected. So he's not really intervening with the free will, but what he's doing is he's controlling the results. We have free will, but we're not in control of the results. That Krishna is in control of. And therefore the Bhagavad Gita says, Kartaham iti manyate. If you think you're the one controlling the results, you're basically overcome by ego, because we're not controlling the result. No one has the power to end the universe. That's not in their control. But they can desire that if they're stupid. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Maharaj. Hare Krishna. Maharaj, are we allowed to make any comments?
Yeah.
Okay. I was listening one of your class, like it was like alumni. He was interviewing His Holiness Bhakti Swami Maharaj. So at the end of the interview, he was asking something like, Maharaj, at this moment, if Prabhupada is, let's say Prabhupada came here, what do you think Prabhupada will think? And then I forgot what was the exact quote, but Maharaj said something like this. He would be very happy to see everyone, but he would ask, where is the local devotees? Actually, yesterday you already addressed the questions, but you didn't give any examples. So in this way, we are seeing, not we are, actually from me, I am just watching some of the, US, UK, and some others globally, biggest ISKCON temples. So you see most of the devotees are like Indian, right now, I'm sorry. So, there's very less of local devotees. So in that way, we can, I can say, since we are allowed to make any questions, is ISKCON is failing here? Or we are not addressing anything? So it's very easy to approach India, or not to approach, one person so much.
It's not, I wouldn't say it's that we're failing, but we have more to do. Any souls that come to Krishna in whatever body, that's glorious, that's a success, that's so pleasing, that's so wonderful. But we want to help all souls in all situations. And so in temples where there may be many, many Indian devotees, I wouldn't say it's a failure, but I would just say that it's good, but we need to do more. And so we want everyone, Indian, English, whatever it may be. So we have to make people feel welcome, and we have to present Krishna consciousness in a relevant way. That means you need to understand the people, what are their interests, what are they going through, what are their challenges, and then you need to present Krishna consciousness in a way that will be inspiring to them. So that's the challenge. We have to learn how to do that.
Thank you, Maharaj. Just going back 2-3 questions and just more elaboration on that, if you could have some. You mentioned about scriptures and how the scriptures actually warn us against these 4 regulative principles. But what if somebody questions the authority of these very scriptures? One could say that it's a very geniusly set up system, fabricated system by some very intelligent person. Do we really need to abide by scriptures?
Okay, so someone may say, do we need to abide by scripture? So my first question, let's pretend you're that person. So my question to you is, what do you abide by? I take it you don't abide by scripture. So then what do you live your life by?
What I think is right, what I think my mind
But what you think means you never came out of the room thinking something. You went through school, you went through university, so many people taught you so many things.
Yes, ma'am.
So if you never went to school, you wouldn't even be able to think. You wouldn't even be able to speak or read English.
Absolutely.
So therefore, do you agree that you have also taken knowledge from others?
Yes.
Do you agree that your opinions, which you say, I think this, are formed by what you learned in your life?
Absolutely.
Do you agree that your worldview, your philosophy is shaped by what you see on the media, the people that surround you and their opinions?
Okay. Yes.
So you are accepting something, we are accepting something, everyone is accepting something, because no person is a social island. So now you have to ask your question, do you want to believe in the media, or do you want to believe in the Munis? Do you want to believe in the scriptures? Which one do you want to believe in? Which one do you think has more integrity? Which one do you think has more depth? Which one do you think is able to give you a more scientific explanation? Which one do you think is free of bias?
Definitely not the media.
Yeah, I agree with you. So the point we're making is that everyone has to put faith in something. So people look at religious people and they say, how can you put faith in all these books? But the amazing thing is they're putting faith in something else.
Yes.
And the thing that they're putting faith in, even if you ask them, they would say, no, I don't trust this. But they are trusting that. So therefore, everyone has to put faith and belief in something. So everyone has to base their approach to life on something higher than themselves, because we're so small. And so we make a conscious decision to go to a body of knowledge that can awaken us to a higher reality. Make sense?
Yes, Maharaj. Thank you very much.
You already answered quite a lot of arguments. I just have maybe 3 arguments left, but let's see if someone else says I can go back to me. And also I just would like to maybe go quickly back to one of the previous questions, because I found that some of the questions you were answering with analogies, which is not really a fact. So I just wanted to go a bit deeper into one of those questions. So one of the arguments we had was that different religions have different creation stories, they have different ways to attain God, they describe God in different ways. So there's a lot of indication that those scriptures have been adjusted by subjective cultural influences, and it's not very reliable. So, and also one thing which I wanted to mention is that if we say that Krishna consciousness is the highest process, then why is it only available to such few percentage? So, for example, if Srila Prabhupada wouldn't have come to the West, we wouldn't have any way to actually read the scriptures at all.
Okay, so let me go one by one. So the first thing you're saying is that scriptures have been adjusted, but I already made that point. I agree with that. When it was asked why there are theological differences, I said two reasons. I said the first reason why there may be theological differences is because there's an evolution of thought. And I said the second reason is because people misinterpret the religion. Either they have access to accurate literature but they misinterpret it, or they take from inaccurate literature. Whichever way it happens, they misinterpret the religion. So I agree with that. So we agree that religions have been tampered with. Yeah. Even some of our acharyas say even our scriptures have become corrupted. So that's definitely a fact. So now, so agreed. So the second point you're making is that if Krishna consciousness is the ultimate, why is it available to only so few people? If Srila Prabhupada had not come, then no one would have it. But that's the whole point, that Krishna makes it available. Krishna sent Srila Prabhupada. In other words, the divine always creates an arrangement by which knowledge is made available, and then those who desire to utilize their free will to access it will get an opportunity. We live in an age of incredible connectivity. So basically you can say this is also a divine arrangement, because it's a way and a means by which spiritual knowledge can reach anyone and everyone. So behind everything is a divine will to proliferate spiritual knowledge and make it accessible. But God will never force it upon people. You can come back if you want.
Yeah, okay, I mean, I understand that. That's one way of looking at it.
You can tell me if there's another way.
We could also say, like, if let's say an atheist wants to now get to know God and he wants to take on the highest process. So then he looks at the whole world and what are the most common religions, practices, and then he might start with Christianity, Islam.
But the first thing also to realize is that we're not saying someone who practices Christianity is in any way lesser. Our standard of religion, Savay Pumsam Paro Dharmo Yado Bhaktir Adho Sajay. Whoever develops love for God, that is the gold standard of religion. And we're not going to sit here and say that anyone in any other religion hasn't developed love for God. If they have, then it's wonderful, it's perfect. So it's not that we think anyone who doesn't practice Krishna consciousness is in some way blocked from, attaining perfection. They can do that in any religion. Yet Krishna consciousness we promote, and not any other religion, because in this practice the most detailed knowledge of God is given, giving you the greatest opportunity. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay,
So
you can.
Yeah. No. So okay, that's good. So then you were saying that the scriptures in the beginning were saying, okay, they might have been adjusted, they might have been tweaked. So then I could say, okay, from my stance, my decision then is it's not reliable, so I'm not relying on it. Your decision is to still take the valuable things out of it. So I guess you could say.
No, but even if you say I don't rely on it, then you'll have to rely on something else.
Yeah.
So what are you going to rely on?
On the facts, which we can prove, we can measure.
But you can't prove or measure any of those facts of science. You're just accepting it in a scientific textbook. People who say they believe in the Big Bang, have they proved it?
Yeah. Okay, maybe.
People who believe in evolutionary theory, have they proved it? People who believe in, the second law of thermodynamics, have they proved it? I mean, it's just a simple question. Have you proved it? Have 99.9% of the people who believe in the second law of thermodynamics, have they gone into a lab and proved it?
So, I mean, there's obviously some facts which we can't fully prove yet, but there are some facts which are
No, but have they proved it? As an individual, have they gone into a lab and proved it? No. Some scientist has proved it, seen it supposedly, and then written it down, and they've accepted it in a book. They haven't proved it. They have no ability to prove it. If you wanted to prove the second law of thermodynamics, could you prove it today?
No.
So, they...
Okay, so maybe let's not start with that one. Maybe let's speak about something like gravity, something which
Okay, can you go into a lab now, today, and prove gravity?
Yes.
How? How would you do it?
I guess you can drop an object and you measure the speed from the top to the bottom and you can measure...
Do you know exactly how to do it?
I'm not a scientist.
But do you believe it?
Yes.
So that means already you've accepted something that you haven't proved.
Well, it's replicable. We can...
It is, you're saying theoretically is, but you haven't done any of that.
Personally not, no.
Yeah, so that means you have faith.
Well, I can literally drop an object now and it can...
Yeah, you're saying you literally can, but you've never done that, yet you still accept it. So that means your whole life you've been living a faith, a belief that you've not proved.
Okay.
So you're as religious as me.
Okay, that's okay.
You see, that's the point. You see, basically every argument that a scientist can give you against religion, they can be charged with the same. They can be charged guilty for the exact same thing. I challenge you to show me that religion is any more faith-based than science. In fact, it's probably the other way around.
But what if we were to literally go into a lab right now and would test it, or I'm a scientist which have tested it?
Okay, so I give you another argument on that one. I give you another argument on that one. Aristotle talks about infinite regress. So what he says is, for example, I'll give you an example. If you want to measure at what temperature water boils, then you set up a whole experiment and the thermometer goes to 100 degrees. Someone says, yeah, we've proved it. But then someone could come along and say, but how do you know the mercury in the thermometer is actually mercury? So then you have to take the mercury out and do another test. But then in the course of that test, you could question something else. And like this, Aristotle says you could go to an infinite regress. So even in science, and scientists will tell you this themselves, in order to advance in an area of understanding, they have to accept some beginning point to be true, and they call it an axiomatic truth. And an axiomatic truth is something that they accept, that they have not proved, but theoretically they accept it in the beginning so that they can advance in that area of knowledge. And then they come back and corroborate it. And that's exactly what we're doing in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, Prabhupada says in the beginning of the Gita, one should at least theoretically accept that Krishna is God and do the experiment and then come back and verify it.
Okay, so I can say you destroyed my argument, but that doesn't mean you established your argument.
Yeah, and that's exactly our point. That the absolute truth cannot be established by logic and argument. Our point is that the absolute truth, bhakti-mam abhijanati, is understood through refined consciousness. Basically, the material world is using the wrong... If you want to prove something, first you have to know what is the experiment and what's the methodology by which to prove it. And that's the basic problem that the world has. They don't know the experiment or the methodology. So therefore, it's like trying to prove the temperature in this room by using a set of weighing scales. That's silly, because it's the wrong instrument. And that's as silly And it's just as silly to try and establish spiritual phenomena through material apparatus. It's just the wrong apparatus. So if someone says, show me God with a microscope, under a microscope, that's as silly as someone saying, tell me the temperature in this room with a set of weighing scales. And if you can't, it means you're not scientific. Because I'm giving you a scientific instrument and then you're not giving me a scientific conclusion. But that's a silly argument because it's the wrong instrument. So what we're saying is that God can be perceived, divinity can be proved. However, it's not proved through material methodology because that's inherently only able to understand material phenomena. In order to understand divinity, you have to refine consciousness.
Okay, I can get back to that. By the way, if anyone else has, I don't want to take too
There are a
much
few
time.
questions here, I think, yeah.
Okay.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So, what are your stances on extreme subjects and extreme topics such as feminism and Andrew Tate, where they take on extreme views and they supposedly prove it? What's the biggest point of view on
What was
this?
the second one?
I'm not sure if you heard of Andrew Tate.
Okay, I don't know, tell me what that is.
Andrew Tate, he's an individual who promotes like a lot of masculinity and basically one of passion, working really hard for endeavors.
Okay, Andrew Tate.
Yes, Andrew Tate.
I'll check it out.
Okay.
He's famous, huh?
Oh, he's very famous.
There you can see I've become institutionalized. So what's my views on that?
Yeah, what's your Vedic view?
The Bhagavad Gita begins by explaining who we are. We're not this body, we're the soul. And so people who get into feminism or people who get into masculinity, whichever side of the scale it is, they've over-identified with the body. If tomorrow you decide to start a whole movement on, people wearing red t-shirts, because you're kind of wearing a red t-shirt today, we kind of think why are you getting so passionate about starting a movement for people wearing red t-shirts? Like tomorrow you may wear a blue t-shirt, it's not a big deal. So people get over absorbed in their temporary identities, and then they allow that identity to basically dominate their consciousness and their life. And so we would say, rather than being feminist or going into deep masculinity, rather the better thing to do is just identify with yourself as a spiritual being, and then understand that temporarily you're in a female or a male body, and how you can use that temporary role to awaken your eternal identity. And don't make your temporary role your identity.
So would you also say that you need to somewhat identify with the body in order to be able to
You don't need to identify with the body, but you need to understand the body. You need to understand the apparatus that Krishna has given you, the strengths, the weaknesses, the opportunities, the threats. Just like if tomorrow you buy a car, you need to understand something about the car. Does it take unleaded petrol? Is it electric car? What kind of oil are you meant to put in the car? How often does it need to be serviced? That doesn't mean you need to become the car. But you just need to know the car because you're using it right now to get from one place to the other. That makes sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. I found something very interesting in the course of this discussion. In so many answers you had mentioned the Bhagavad Gita, and very interestingly you also mentioned that Prabhupada in the preface of Bhagavad Gita he writes, one should at least assume theoretically that Krishna is God. I really like how scientifically and logically you're looking at it, my personal experience by reading the Bhagavad Gita was just terrible. I couldn't find much organization in it, to be honest. At one place, Krishna is talking about how we're not the soul, how we're not the body with the soul, and then suddenly Krishna comes to the fact that we go to different planets after death. So the logical flow, at least, let's just put it this way: I don't have the capacity to grasp it. How do you think? I'm convinced to read the Bhagavad Gita because I think the way you're answering so many answers in the Bhagavad Gita. But how do you think can I relish the Bhagavad Gita? How do you think one should approach the Gita, and how do you think we can study the Gita? So
in the very first purport of the Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada gives three instructions for how to study Bhagavad Gita. First thing is he says, study it very scrutinizingly. In other words, when you approach spiritual literature, I always tell people it's like a spiral. You read it again and again and again, and then you'll go deeper. So don't think that you're going to relish the Bhagavad Gita or understand it in one reading. Don't even think you're going to do it in 2 or 3. You may need 4, 5, 6. But every time you read, you'll actually understand it in a deeper way. So the first thing is to read it patiently, repeatedly, scrutinizingly. Second thing Srila Prabhupada says is one should read it with the help of someone who has understood it. So therefore, Tadvidi Pranipadena Pariprashnena Sevaya Upadeshanti Te Jnanam Tattvadarshina. So you have to find the Tattvadarshi, one who has understood it, one who has grasped it, one who is experiencing it and living it. And in their company, one can grasp it. And then the third thing Srila Prabhupada says is that one should read without personally motivated interpretations. And what that means is that you have to approach Gita with the right mood. If you approach it just to get some information, or if you approach it just so that you can learn something to tell someone else, or if you approach it to try to reinforce your own views, then you'll never be able to understand it. You have to approach it with a sincere mood that now I'm trying to find God. And then you'll be able to understand it. But if you approach it for any other material reason, you won't be able to understand. So got it? Number 1?
Read it scrutinizingly.
Number 2?
Read it in association if a person is
And
understood.
number 3?
And do not have any personal motivated interpretations.
Perfect. It's 10 past 9.
We still have time.
We still have time. Sure.
It's up to you and them, but...
I mean, for me, I don't know how everyone here is doing. Like, they've been awake since 4:30.
Yeah. Prasadam will be served around 9:30-ish.
Do you guys want to chill out for 15 minutes? Or you want
We
to...
still have a couple of questions, I think.
Just one question.
Okay. If anyone feels like they need to stretch their legs, by all means, you can stand up and walk out. We'll get you back later. Yeah, if you need to, just relax, no problem.
Maharaj, oftentimes we hear about the glorification of Shravanam, but we can't, there's nothing like mentions what to hear, how to hear, and where to hear. Like for me, when I hearing means like I really like to listen to kirtan. Does it means like I'm just also like at the same time I have another problem.
You like to listen to kirtan, you sinful person. It's clear, right? What to hear, how to hear, who to hear from. It's clear. What to hear? Tannama rupa charitadi sukirtananu shmrityo kramena rasana manasi niyojya. Hear about Krishna, hear about his name, fame, form, qualities, his pastimes, his philosophy, his instructions. Clear. How to hear? Like we even said here, how should you read Bhagavad Gita? Here with others. Isn't it? So you hear always with others. Satam prasangan mama virya samvedo bhavanti rit karna rasayana katha. When you're doing katha, you always hear with others and you listen very attentively. And then who you should hear from? That person should be tattvadarshi. They should understand. They should be living it. They should be pure in character. They should be devotees of Krishna. Avaishnav mukut girnam putam hari katham ridam. Don't hear from someone who is avaishnav, because it's like milk touched by the lips of a snake. Is clear? Now, if you like to hear more katha, or you like to hear more kirtan, we are all individual. So some will like more kirtan, someone will like more hari katha, but Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur says they must go together. So even if you're more on the kirtan side, you still have to do hari katha, because like we never worship Radha or Krishna alone. We always worship them together. Because Radharani is the Swarup Shakti of Krishna. So similarly, Hari Katha is the Swarup Shakti of Hari Kirtan. And therefore, both have to go hand in hand. Make sense?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. It's not a challenge, it's a question that in regards to evolution, that in Rethinking Darwin, the book, they disprove Darwinism, but what's the Vedic paradigm or the Vedic perspective on evolution and creation?
So we don't believe in evolution, we believe in devolution. Evolution is the idea that there were very, very basic organisms which then later on through mutation and natural selection and so on and so forth evolved into much more complex beings. Whereas in the Vedic paradigm, we believe that creation begins with the most complex being. Who's that? Brahma. So Brahma, his entire body is made of intelligence. If you thought artificial intelligence was good, Brahma's whole body is intelligence. So from Brahma, all the other species come. So it's clear. It's like, you know, like sometimes you have cars. So you can have like, I'm trying to think now, it's been so long. Like you can have a Volkswagen Polo. And then you have a Volkswagen Golf. And then you have a Volkswagen, what's the higher model? Passat. Passat, right? And they all look like each other, right? Isn't it? They kind of look like each other, so the same headlight. So an unintelligent person will say, oh look, the Golf evolved from the Polo, the Passat evolved from the Golf. But an intelligent person will understand there was one creator who made them all at the same time, with a connection between them. You see, understand? So the evolution theory is that first there was the Polo, and then after millions of years, the Polo, you know, adapted to its situation and it became a Golf. And then after another 100 million years, it realized it needed a bigger boot, so it became a Passat. Whereas an intelligent person would say, no, there was a person at the beginning and he understood different people needed different sizes of cars. And therefore he made all of them at the same time. Does that make sense?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. We often hear about people speaking about existential crisis, and this goes on to how do I know I'm real? Am I living in a matrix or a simulation? Am I a brain in a jar witnessing?
Okay, a philosopher asked this question. I'm going to ask you, how do you know? Tell me the answer to this one, yeah? So a philosopher said, say I go to sleep and I dream that I'm a butterfly. No, it's not. So he said, how can you prove to me that you are a human dreaming that you're a butterfly and that you're not a butterfly dreaming that you're a human? What's the answer? Do you understand the question?
Yeah.
Say tonight you dream that you're a butterfly, and your conclusion when you wake up is, oh, last night I dreamt I was a butterfly. The philosopher says, how can you be sure it's not the other way around? That you're a butterfly that's dreaming you're a human.
How would the butterfly know what a human does?
How would you know what butterfly is?
Yeah, you can use the same way around. How do you know that you are a human dreaming you're a butterfly and not the other way around?
I was thinking around the lines of Maharaj, we could somehow or the other break some sort of illusion. Like, for example, if someone's sleeping and they're dreaming, we shake them, wake them up, so the illusion is broken. But when we are awake, as we perceive to be like, we are awake right now, no amount of shaking or pinching or slapping is going to change our reality.
It's good. That's close. That's close. There's one key difference. Okay, shall I tell you? When you're the butterfly, okay, let me phrase this properly. He says, the way you know that you're a human dreaming that you're a butterfly is that when you're in your dream as a butterfly, do you remember being a human? No. But when you're in the role of a human, do you remember being a butterfly?
Yes.
Therefore, he says, you know that you're the human dreaming you're a butterfly because in the human state, you can remember both things. But in the other state, you can only remember one identity. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now you can proceed with your question.
So my full question was, how do I know I'm not living in a simulation like the movie The Matrix? They're just plugged into a computer and then they think that's reality. And then the second bit was the brain in a jar clip. How do I know I'm not just a brain in some jar and I'm just being played these events and I'm just watching what's happening?
Okay, so how do you know that you're saying, how do you even know that you're conscious?
Yeah, basically.
Right. But that question is almost like it's a self-defeating question, because if you weren't conscious, like nothing, like it wouldn't, like. So to make life valuable, to make life meaningful, we have to begin from the point of accepting we have some volition and free will. Otherwise, everything would just be meaningless. So you could say perhaps the most compelling argument that we're not just a blob of energy that's just firing under some universal law. The most compelling argument is that we have volition, free will, and we see life as meaningful and purposeful. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Because if you were just, otherwise there's no point to do anything. Like, why would you even wake up in the morning? It would be meaningless. And that's why atheists, it doesn't actually make any sense. Like, for example, you have the great acharyas of our time, like Richard Dawkins, who go around the world on a campaign trying to prove that everything is matter, right? The amazing thing is, his philosophy is basically, we came from matter, we are matter, we go back into matter, And then my question to him would be, if everything's matter, nothing matters. So why are you working so hard to try to convince the world that God doesn't exist? Why don't you just leave them to it? Because ultimately, if everything's matter, it's all meaningless, and we're just all blobs of chemicals. And if I dumped you in the ocean, or I dumped a can of Coke in the ocean, it would be the same thing. Because after all, nothing has value. So actually, but he doesn't, and none of us feel like that. Which is the most compelling argument that we're sentient, conscious entities. We all innately have a respect for life. Why? Because we know it's more than matter.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Maharaj, I think the discussion is coming around how we might talk about Satchidananda, how the living entity is eternal, blissful and joyful. My question is that we understand that we are not matter, but how do we understand we are eternal?
We understand that we're not matter, but how do we understand we're eternal? Well, if you know you're not matter, the only option left is that you're antimatter.
Yes.
Or metaphysical. So whether you want to call it the spirit, whether you want to call it the soul, whether you want to call it metaphysical consciousness, or whether you want to call it antimatter, we're talking about the same thing. Matter is temporary, and therefore antimatter must be eternal. So, that's my dad. So, it's interesting, you know, like every fairy tale ends with what words?
They live happily ever after.
They lived happily ever after. What are the three qualities of the soul? Sat, Chit, Ananda. So if someone says they want to ever after, that means lived. That means conscious. That means Chit. And happily. So even when a fairy tale says they lived happily ever after, they're actually talking about the soul. But no one lives happily ever after in the material world. We only live happily ever after in the spiritual world, in spiritual identity. So even that's a very deep theological statement that every fairy tale makes. Because it points to the deepest aspiration that is innately within every single living being, to want to live happily ever after. Sorry?
Yes, Maharaj, thank you very much.
If you want to conclude it here, it's okay.
Finish here?
Yeah, it's okay.
Prove Hare
Okay, last one.
Okay, I just wanted to bring it back to the atheist discussion. Actually, there was still a few arguments about which I have, but I just wanted to go maybe to the last point due to time. If we were to accept that there's a God, actually two things. So one point being that if God created the universe, who created God? And the second question is...
Okay, shall we begin with that one? If God created the universe, who created God? So, there's one philosopher, he talks about the ontological argument for God, and it's basically answering this point. He says, if you ever look at anyone, they have their source in something. Right? So, our understanding of the world is that something comes from something else. We never have the experience that something comes from nothing. So therefore, according to ontology, everything in the world has its source in something. Right? So therefore, if you keep going back, then eventually you come to something which doesn't have its source in anything. The fact that there must be something that doesn't have its source in anything, the fact that anything exists means that there must be something which has its source in nothing. Otherwise nothing else could exist.
It will go forever, isn't it?
Yeah.
Infinite relation.
So this is the ontological argument for God. The fact that everything exists, do you believe everything exists?
Yes.
Yeah. And do you believe something always comes from something else?
Yes.
So therefore, according to logic, you therefore must conclude that there was something which Aristotle calls an unmoved mover, or we would call it the sarva karana karanam. He says there must exist something which doesn't have its source in anything in order for anything in this world to exist. And that thing, by nature, clearly has to be very, very different to anything of this world. And that's basically God. Now, if you want to call it God or if you want to call it something else, that's fine. But the point is there's an unmoved mover.
Okay. But that goes against what we just accepted before, that something comes always from
It
something.
doesn't go against it because we're saying that the unmoved mover is of a different nature. So it doesn't have to follow that law. And we have no experience in this world of an unmoved mover. And therefore, when we come to that unmoved mover, we have to understand that is an entity or an energy or a reality or whatever you want to call it, which is obviously of a completely different nature. And that's what God is.
Okay, that means though, because we don't have any evidence in this material world, we just have to accept it blindly.
Yeah, not blindly, because I've already given you a rationale behind it. But yes, we have to accept it just like you have to accept the Big Bang. Or just like you have to accept evolution. No more faith required, same amount of faith. In fact, more faith is required for the Big Bang because it goes counterintuitive to everything we experience in life.
Well,
where in your experience does order come from chaos? Do you have that experience?
no,
Can you give me an experience in your life of order coming from chaos?
I can't, but
So why do you believe it?
I can't, but I
Well,
was.
why do you believe it? Why do you believe the Big Bang then? When you don't have any experience of that, why do you believe it?
Well, I would say because we can see in the world that how science has brought so much success, so it has a very good track record. So
Okay, so I can fix your car, therefore I can also tell you where the universe came from. let me give you all the answers to where the universe came from, because after all, I did fix your car.
what I would say is that I could argue exactly the same way for God as the creator. So in the sense that you were saying, just help me out there again with the Big Bang, that we haven't experienced that order comes from chaos. We also don't have to experience that something comes from nothing, or as in like a separate entity. So
Yeah, because all we've ever experienced is material.
yeah.
Therefore, we must conclude, the logical thing to conclude is that there is something anti-material. But science doesn't go with that logic, and they try to create a material as the beginning of something. But even they don't answer it, because where did all that matter come from in the first place? So there's no explanation. So it's a stubborn resistance which comes from an ego that wants to try to reduce everything within their own Tiny brains. I was going to say something worse than that. We'll go with the light version today. So that's the problem with reductionism. You see, if there is something that you're trying to grasp, the humble thing to do is to realize your limitation and then to look outside of that for other explanations. But scientists, they don't do that. What they try to do is reduce everything to bring it into their perception. But necessarily you will come to wrong conclusions because you're now trying to reduce something of irreducible complexity. And that's the basic problem with science. The methodology is wrong. All right, there's a question at the back.
It's kind of more similar to the last question about the single, like non-matter creator.
Mm-hmm.
I think in Buddhism they have a principle of dependent arising, that one thing can't actually exist without something else, and they use an analogy of like, I think like a system of bubbles, where one thing reflects...
Bubbles?
Yeah. So they're reflective, so one thing reflects off the other, which reflects off the other, so they kind of give each other power in that sense, so there's not a need for like one single creator to give something else energy. What would be like a counteraction for that?
Yeah, but what they're doing is basically they're answering the argument from a point of accepting that things are existing. And then from that point, everything gives energy to everything else.
Yeah.
So they're not really getting to the root of the problem. And that's also what scientists do. They say like, okay, the universe came from a singularity, an incredible concentration of all the matter at a superheated temperature at a single point, and from there but even if that's true, how in the world did it all get there in the first place? So not only is their explanation substandard, but their explanation comes in at a midpoint, not addressing the root issue. So even if the Buddhists say that we can understand how things perpetuate because energy reflects off one bubble into another bubble, or whatever that. But even then, like, it's not getting to origins. See?
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. Thank you.
Alright.
This will be the last question.
Naman, you're going to bow down.
Why are there natural disasters? And
why are there natural disasters?
And why isn't God doing anything to protect the living entities who are suffering from these natural disasters?
Thanks for asking a simple question at the end. This requires more explanation. We have to understand, like I said, the world is perfectly imperfect. Unless you begin from that point. You see, like, it's like this. You can't understand anything that happens in the world until you first understand why the world exists. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So 99.9% of the people in the world are completely baffled at what's happening in the world. And you know the reason why they're baffled? I just told you. Because they don't understand
how the world works.
Yeah, and why are they baffled? Because they don't understand the purpose. Yeah. Try to understand this point. If you understand the purpose of the world, then you can understand what happens in the world. But if you don't understand the purpose of the world, everything that happens in the world will be confusing. Now, according to spiritual knowledge, the purpose of the world is that it's a university. This world exists to make us realize we're not meant to be here. And so, when you see the purpose of the world as that, then you can begin to understand, oh, that's why there's suffering, that's why there's difficulty, that's why I undergo all of these things, because it's meant to help me understand I need to get out of here. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So there are natural disasters, there are wars, there are sufferings, there are all kinds of obstacles and anxieties, because it's perfectly imperfect. It's like saying, why is there, why is there this annoying guy in the jail who locks me up? Or why don't they give me a menu for whatever food I want in jail? Why doesn't the door open? Why doesn't my room door open in jail? No, my friend, you're in jail. It's a locked door. It's meant to be like that. Because you're meant to be there and then realize, I need to change. And when you change, then you get out. You understand? Yeah. Anyway, that question requires a lot more because, people go through so much suffering, and it's not like we want to judge them or anything like that. But we must understand there's the purpose of the world. Then you can understand the workings of the world. Alright? Gaura Gaura, Haribo, thank you so much. Srila Prabhupada ki Jai.